I'm Peter Winkelstein. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Healthcare Informatics, which is the university's research data repository for healthcare data. At the IHI, we store healthcare data securely and make it available to researchers. Our primary tool for delivering data, for exploring the data, is called i2b2. This is a dashboard and a database that allows researchers to take a look at the data that we have in a de-identified way to discover if there are enough patients that meet criteria for the research to make it worthwhile going forward with the research, and to kind of explore what data we might have. The idea is that if a researcher finds that we have a cohort that makes sense to them in our database, then they can go to the IRB, get approval to get the data they need for that cohort, and then come back to the IHI and we'll deliver the data to them in a secure fashion. So i2b2 is that first step, that exploratory step to find out what data we have. It's that step for researchers to look and see what data is available in our research data repository, and is a tool that they can use themselves. This is a tool that is designed for researchers to use themselves to explore the data. They can see how many patients we have that meet certain criteria of their choosing, and they can do this themselves from the comfort of their own desktop. A researcher might be interested in patients with diabetes who might meet certain criteria on their hemoglobin A1C values and perhaps some medications they might be taking. And if they find that there's enough patients that meet those criteria, then they can go to the IRB, they can ask for approval to get the data for those patients so that they can go forward with whatever their research protocol entails. So right now in i2b2, we have available much of the data that has been collected in the university's own electronic health record through the university's practice plans. So researchers can explore that data themselves and see what patients are there, how many patients are there, again, in a fully de-identified and secure fashion. We will, over time, be adding more data to that. We have claims data in our research data repository. We will be getting hospital data in our research data repository, and over time, the data that can be explored with i2b2 will be expanding. So researchers right now can start using that tool, and they can go ahead and see what we have in our outpatient database. Researchers can look right now to see what data is available from the university's own outpatient electronic health record, see what patients are there, see what lab values they have, see what medications they're on, see how many patients meet criteria, and if they find enough patients that make it worthwhile to go forward with a clinical trial or go forward with data research, then they approach the IRB for permission to go further. So here's an example of how the i2b2 program works. So first we're logging on to the i2b2 portal, and then we're going to start looking for patients. In this particular example, we're going to look for patients that have a diagnosis of diabetes. Now, one way you can do that is you can navigate through this hierarchy of diagnoses. You can go from there into endocrine and start drilling down to find diabetes. And that works very well if you're looking for very, very general things. But if you're trying to be a little more specific or go more quickly, then it's easier to use the Find tab and actually look for the specific item that you're looking for directly. So in this case, we're going to look for a diagnosis of diabetes. The i2b2 is going to look for it. And there is diabetes, so we're going to select diabetes, and we're going to say, find us all patients that have diabetes. But before we run this query, I want to add some additional criteria. So I'm interested not on all patients that have diabetes, but I'm interested in those patients that have diabetes and also have a high hemoglobin A1C. So let's look for the hemoglobin A1C lab value. So we look under laboratory tests, we search for the A1C, and then we find a hemoglobin A1C lab value. We AND that with the criteria of diabetes, and in this particular case, we're going to look for a hemoglobin A1C that is greater than 6.5. And now, before we run the query this time, we're also going to look for those patients that have diabetes, have a high hemoglobin A1C, and are on some form of medication for their diabetes. So we're going to look for medications, we're going to look for insulin in this case. And so we'll take the insulin criteria and AND it with the other one. So right now, the query is set up to look for patients who carry a diagnosis of diabetes, have a hemoglobin A1C of greater than 6.5, and are taking some form of insulin. So we run that query, and let's see what we get. So there's 1,680 patients in our database that meet that particular criteria. So if you were a researcher interested in patients who met those criteria, you would now know that there are potentially 1,680 of them in our database available to you for research. If you felt that that was enough, if you felt that that was worth going further with, then you could approach the IRB, ask for permission to get to those particular patients' data, and we could deliver that to you in a secure fashion from the IHI. i2b2 is available now. It's up and running. In order to get access to it, you can either contact the CTSA or you can actually log on to the web page directly and apply for a username and a password, which we'll assign to you. The web page is ihi-i2b2.med.buffalo.edu. It's very straightforward to use. Please take a look at it. Please request a username and password and start exploring the data. We look forward to working with you. If you have any questions at all, please contact the CTSA or contact us at the IHI.